These decks are actually nuts, man.
Subscribe.
The Branded Chronicles deck is finally here, and it is one of the most complete, competitive, and valuable out-of-the-box structure deck products ever printed. Some of the new combos with this deck can be absolutely ridiculous, and things can get very overwhelming very quickly, so I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to get started playing with 3 of these bad boys. We are here training the next generation of Branded players, baby. Not only are we going to kit you out with a full deck list, but we're also going to teach you a bunch of the new combos that you need to know, and then recommend some cards that you'll need to take the deck to its final form. I will say that Branded is one of the most difficult decks to play correctly, so if you have a hard time in the beginning, don't give up, and eventually your technical play will be rewarded and you'll be having a lot of fun at the same time. Now, if you're ready to start fusion summoning, let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to get started by going through what I believe to be the optimal deck list for combining 3 Chronicles structure decks together. After that, we'll speak about some of the interesting choices I've made, some of my hot takes, and then we'll go into a little bit of theory to help you understand what you're doing with the deck, and then we'll move on to some combos. So getting into the main deck, we have 3 copies of Aliber, 3 copies of Branded Opening, 2 copies of Branded Fusion, because it is, of course, at 2. We have the 1 Gold Sarcophagus, the 1 Foolish Burial, we also have the Springans kit here, and then 3 copies of Nadir Servant. These are all of our 1-card combos. They're not all doing the same thing either. It's very versatile. For example, if Branded Fusion gets ashed, you can still do things with Nadir Servant, or if, Aliber gets impermed, you can still Branded Opening for Quem, etc, etc. But yeah, 14 1-card combos. From there, we have 3 copies of Albion the Shrouded Dragon, 3 copies of Bestial Saronir, 3 copies of Branded in High Spirits, 3 copies of Fusion Deployment, and then 2 copies of Cartesia, and 2 copies of Guiding Quem as well. These are essentially our 2-card combos. A lot of the effects here involve sending branded spells and traps to the graveyard, so you can send Branded Fusion with 1 card and Branded Retribution with another card, and then Branded Retribution can add back the Branded Fusion. That's like a very simplified way of looking at it there, but yeah, very heavy on the engine and very consistent on all the starting plays. We also, of course, have 3 Fallen of Albaz, and then 3 of the new quick play spell, the Fallen and the Virtuous. This card is very good. It's an interruption and an end board piece. You can just use this to trigger your Quem basically at any point, and it helps your own monsters dodge targeting effects like Effect Failure and Impermanence, because you can destroy any face-up card on the field. So yeah, absolutely mandatory as a 3 of. For our engine requirements, we are playing 1 Tragedy. We'd send this with Gold Sark or Foolish Burial, or sometimes Branded Fusion to get access to Aliber or Quem. We have the 1 Bestial Lubellion, 1 Tri-Brigade Mercurier, 1 Branded Lost, 1 Branded in White, which is kind of like a Miracle Fusion and a plan B if Branded Fusion gets ashed, Branded Retribution, and I guess the main spice is Ecclesia and a Fleur-de-Lis here as well. We'll talk about why this card is included in the list after we go through the full deck. But rounding off the main deck here, we have 3 Triple Tactics Thrust and the 1 Fusion Duplication, and that is 48 cards in the main deck. Branded typically plays between like 45 and 50, sometimes even higher than that. And that is typically just because of all the different engine requirements that you have to play in the deck. So with a higher deck count, you are much less likely to brick. Going into the extra deck, we have 3 copies of Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 copy of Lubellion the Searing Dragon, 2 Mirror Jade, 2 Titaniclans, typically 1 to send, maybe 1 to summon, 2 of the new Fusion, the Dragon that Devours the Dogma, again, 1 to send, typically 1 to summon, 2 copies of Grand Guignol, 1 Rindbrum, sometimes you can summon this, other times you'll use this in graveyards to summon back Albaz, 1 Sprint because it only requires a monster that was special summoned this turn, so typically with your Fallen of Albaz, you'll be able to fuse with almost anything into the Sprint, the Iron Dash Dragon. And then finally, we have the Alba Lunatis, not only as a decent send for Mirror Jade on turn 2 for, a turn 3 fusion spell, but it's also nice to run just to power through the dragon decks that you might face, things like Blue Eyes and Dragon Link and things like that. And then for the side deck, I have 3 copies of Super Poly, 3 copies of Nibiru. I've just thrown 3 of the Black Goat Laughs in here as well. We got the Magnamut, the Druis Worm, and the Branded Beast, specifically for like back row decks, and then the 2 additional copies of Fusion Duplication for going first. And that is a 14-card side deck, but there isn't that many great options. This is just kind of like the best of what we were given. Now, to get a kind of better understanding of the deck, I've boiled the entire thing down to our key interruptions here. So the Mirror Jade, the Mercurier, the Fallen and the Virtuous is of course a pop, and then the Fallen of Albaz fusing with your opponent's monsters. These are near enough our only ways of disrupting our opponent, because the entire extra deck in the product is full of, you know, just the Albaz fusions that don't really interrupt the opponent whatsoever. A lot of Branded's power comes from being able to summon things like Guardian Chimera, Borreload Furious Dragon, Star Source Chaos Dragon, or whatever it's called. The Light and Darkness Dragon Overlord. We don't have any of that, so with just the 3 structure decks, you kind of have to play the deck differently than you would to a typical full power Branded list. No matter how much gas you have in your hand, the maximum output you're gonna have is basically these 4 interruptions, of course Albaz being summoned off of either the Quem or the Rindbrum. But that just means that Quem is a key end piece on the board, and she is of course always treated as a Dogmatica card, which leads us to the inclusion of Ecclesia and Fleur de Lis. The idea of these 2 cards in the deck is to be able to increase your output of interruptions. The new fusion in the end phase can search for a Dogmatica card, which could just be the Fleur de Lis, which would then be live because you would try to be ending on the Quem. But on top of that, the other effect of Granguignol special summons a Dogmatica monster from the deck or a Despia monster from the extra deck. There are no Despia monsters in the extra deck, so the only target you would typically be playing is the Quem, and you're already trying to end on the Quem anyway. So by adding the Ecclesia into the deck as an option to summon off of the Granguignol, we then turn this card into an additional interruption by getting a Fleur de Lis to our hand. And the combos I'm going to show you are going to include all of these cards. Now, kind of in a similar fashion, you would typically see Branded in red and Super Poly in a Branded deck. However, due to the lack of options in the extra deck, Super Poly isn't really that great. It's only good going second if you can get Albaz onto the board to force the fusion to go through. So I've put it in the side for going second. Branded in red is typically used as an end board set off of Albion to then go into something like Guardian Chimera or one of your other powerful fusion monsters that aren't included in the deck. Therefore, this isn't really needed and pretty much just serves the same function as Branded in white. There's no real reason to play both of these when you're only playing the structure decks. So you can pick one. It really comes down to preference. I prefer Branded in white because you can use something like Albion the Shrouded Dragon in graveyard while it's called Fallen of Albaz. So yeah, Branded in red, not really needed. And then Nibiru, you could play this in your main deck, but honestly, I don't think it's worth it because not only would it take your deck count above 50, the list I've got is currently 48 cards, but Nibiru being your only hand trap is kind of just a waste of a card in your hand because Nibiru typically doesn't do anything by itself and usually has to be paired with another hand trap like Imperm or Veiler or something like that. So I've once again put this in the side deck for it to come in against decks where, you know, it's guaranteed to do something. All of that being said, when it comes to just the pure gameplay of the deck, the idea is that you want to figure out how you can gain access to these interruptions. So let's get into some of the combos and show you what I've cooked up. All right, combo time, baby. The first combo we're going to show you is, of course, just a singular Branded Fusion plus a discard as well. So we're going to activate the Branded Fusion, sending a Tragedy and an Albaz to the graveyard to special summon out the Lubellion. We'll then go Chainlink 1 Lubellion, discarding a card for cost, and Chainlink 2 Tragedy, adding Alibur from the deck to the hand. Of course, Lubellion will fuse with the Albaz in graveyard to summon out a Mirror Jade. We're then going to normal summon Alibur and activate the effect, grabbing the Fallen and the Virtuous. And from there, we simply proceed into the end phase, otherwise known as main phase 3 in the Branded deck. We're going to activate the effect of Mirror Jade, sending a Titaniclad to the graveyard to banish the Alibur. And then still in the end phase, we'll activate the effect of Titaniclad. That's going to summon a Quem from the deck. Quem effect on summon is going to send an Albaz to the graveyard so that we can then special summon it on our opponent's turn to fuse with our opponent's monsters. And here, still in the end phase, we'll activate the Fallen and the Virtuous, sending an Albion the Branded Dragon to the graveyard for cost, targeting the Mirror Jade to destroy it. That's going to resolve. On resolution, Quem is going to trigger. Since a card left the extra deck, we can summon back the Mirror Jade from the graveyard. And then still in the end phase, we can activate the effect of Albion to set another copy of the Fallen and the Virtuous. So Mirror Jade is once again live. It's once per copy, then you use the effect, it's once per 2 turns. So we essentially have 3 disruptions here. We have the effect of Fallen and Virtuous to destroy a face-up card, sending a card from the extra deck to the graveyard. It could be, you know, Rindbrum or something else for follow-up. We can then special summon back the Albaz from the graveyard with the effect of Quem. discard a card with the Albaz to fusion summon with our opponent's monster, probably into a sprint because we can use anything for that was special summoned this turn. And then we of course still have the effect on Mirror Jade as well, sending something like Albalinatus to the graveyard to grab another branded fusion in the end phase. Not bad for one branded fusion, especially compared to the Albaz Strike structure deck 3 years ago. My god, dude. 2 interruptions, Mirror Jade and our one-sided Raigeki for 3000 or higher attack monsters. Alright, next combo is going to be an Aliber plus a discard. So, normal summon the Aliber, activate the effect, grabbing a branded fusion from the deck. We'll then activate the branded fusion. This time, we're sending Albaz and the Libellion to the graveyard to summon out Albion the branded dragon. Activate the effect of Albion, banishing both the Aliber and the Albaz from grave to special summon out the Libellion. Libellion effect is going to discard a card to shuffle back the Albaz and the Libellion to fuse into the Mirror Jade. We can then attribute the Albion to special summon the Libellion and activate the effect of Libellion to place Branded Lost. And then from there, we go into the end phase, main phase 3. We're going to activate the effect of Mirror Jade, sending a Titaniclad to the grave for cost to banish the Libellion. Still in the end phase, we're going to go Titaniclad effect to summon out the Quem. Quem effect on summon is going to dump the Albaz to the graveyard, and we then trigger the Albion to grab a Fallen and the Virtuous to her hand. We can activate the Fallen and the Virtuous, sending a copy of the Dragon that devours the Dogma to grave for cost, targeting the Mirror Jade to destroy it. That's going to trigger the Quem to summon back the Mirror Jades. And then, still in the end phase, we'll activate the effect of the Dragon that devours the Dogma, and we'll add a copy of Fleur-de-Lis to the hand. Of course, this Mirror Jade was not summoned from the extra deck, so we do need to be aware that the Fleur-de-Lis is not currently live until we fuse on our opponent's turn, or our opponent summons a monster from the extra deck. But on our opponent's turn, we can activate the effect of Mirror Jade, sending a Albion, I guess, just for follow-up, which will trigger the Quem to summon back the Albaz. Albaz effect is going to discard a card to fuse with an opponent's monster that was special summoned this turn into the sprint. That will trigger the Branded Lost, grabbing us a Mercurier to the hand, giving us a total of 4 interruptions, with the Fleur-de-Lis, the Mercurier, the Mirror Jade, and the Albaz fusing an opponent's monster as well. Alright, now I'll show you what we do with a singular Nadir Servant. Remember, we're not playing Dogmatica Maximus, so with the singular Nadir Servant, we can activate it, sending a copy of Albion to the graveyard to add a Quem to the hand. We can then normal summon our Quem and activate the effect to dump an Albaz to the graveyard, and then simply go to the end phase. Albion will set the Fallen and the Virtuous. So, on our opponent's turn, we can activate the Fallen and the Virtuous to pop a card, and then Quem can summon back the Albaz to fuse with an opponent's monster, hopefully leading to a Mirror Jade for a total of 3 interruptions from the Nadir Servant. It's also worth noting that you can search the Ecclesia or the Fleur-de-Lis as well with the Nadir Servant in case you want to, say, special Ecclesia and add Fleur-de-Lis if you've already used your normal summon. It really depends how far you got with the rest of your turn. Alright, now this is where things start getting a little ridiculous. So our combo here is going to be Branded in High Spirits, a Bestial Saronir, and then potentially a discard here as well. So, in the draw phase, we'll start by activating Branded in High Spirits, sending a Titaniclad to the graveyard, alongside the Bestial Saronir, to add a copy of Quem to the hand. On resolution, Saronir will trigger, dumping a Branded Retribution to the graveyard. Then we'll go main phase, normal summon Quem, Quem effect to dump a Branded Fusion, and we can activate the effect of Retribution in graveyard, banishing itself to add back the Branded Fusion. Now here we're going to activate Branded Fusion, and this time we're going to send Albaz and Cartesia to the graveyard to summon out Albion the Branded Dragon. Chainlink 1 Albion, chainlink 2 Quem, targeting the Cartesia to summon it back. Albion will banish the Albaz and the Bestial Saronir from before to summon out the Libellion. Libellion effect will discard a card, of course, to shuffle back the Albaz and the Libellion to fuse out a Mirror Jade. From here, we can activate the effect of Cartesia to fuse with the Albion into a Granguignol, and then the effect of Granguignol on summon can send the Dragon that devours the Dogma. From here, we proceed to the end phase. We have 3 end phase triggers to resolve. So, we're going to start by activating Albion in the end phase to set a copy of the Fallen and the Virtuous. We'll then activate the end phase effect of the Dragon that devours the Dogma. Because we haven't gone through the Bestial Libellion or Branded Lost here, we'll just add the Tri-Brigade Mercurier off of the effect. And then we don't have an Albaz in rotation at the moment, so with the Titaniclads, we can add or special summon a Fallen of Albaz. And now when it gets to our opponent's turn, we can disrupt them with the effect of the Fallen and the Virtuous, sending like a Rinbrum to the graveyard to pop a card. That's going to trigger the Quem, summoning back the Cartesia on Revz. We can then activate the effect of Cartesia fusing itself, the Grand Guignol and the Albaz into the towers, it does have an effect on summon to shuffle back from graveyard and banishment, so we can use that to potentially disrupt our opponent or, you know, potentially shuffle back some of our resources. At any point, we can use Rinbrum to summon out the Albaz. Albaz will discard another card to fuse into the Sprint. And then once we're done fusing, we don't want to use the extra deck anymore. If our opponent triggers the Grand Guignol at any point, we can activate that to summon out the Ecclesia, pretend the Mirror Jade's in the extra monster zone. Ecclesia effect can add the Fleur-de-Lis. So we have the Fleur-de-Lis live, we have the Mercurial live, we still have the Mirror Jade live. I think that's like 6 interruptions in total with just the Saronir in the Branded and High Spirits. So you see what I mean? It gets really crazy, dude. Alright, and finally, another fun little example here. We have Albion the Shrouded Dragon and Fusion Deployment. So we are going to start by activating the Fusion Deployment, revealing the Grand Guignol to special summon out the Cartesia. We'll then activate the effect of Albion in hand, sending Retribution to grave for cost, and chain Cartesia while the Albion is still in hand to fuse them together, of course, into the Grand Guignol. And Grand Guignol effect on summon is going to dump the Saronir to grave. Saronir effect will activate on resolution, dumping a branded fusion, and we can then activate the effect of Retribution, adding back the branded fusion. We'll activate branded fusion. Even now, there's a lot of different lines you can go for. Like I said, it can get pretty overwhelming, but here we're going to send the Albaz and the Tragedy to graveyard to special summon out the Lubellion. Chainlink 1 Lubellion, discarding a card. And of course, Chainlink 2 Tragedy is going to grab an Aliber from the deck to the hand. And then the Lubellion will summon out a Mirror Jade by shuffling back the materials, of course. From here, we're going to normal summon the Aliber and activate its effect, grabbing a copy of the Fallen and the Virtuous to hand because it's always treated as a branded spell. And then we're simply going to go to the end phase, the main phase 3. Activating the effect of Mirror Jade in the end phase, we're going to send a Titaniclad to the graveyard to banish the Aliber. End phase effect of Titaniclad will summon out a Quem from the deck. Quem on summon is going to dump a Fallen of Albaz. Now we'll activate the Fallen and the Virtuous, sending an Albion to the grave for cost. Target the Mirror Jade to destroy it. On resolution, Quem is going to summon back the Mirror Jade, and then we can activate the Albion Engrave, setting another copy of the Fallen and Virtuous here. So on our opponent's turn, we can activate the Fallen and the Virtuous, sending like the Rinbrum to grave to destroy a card. That'll trigger the Quem, summoning back the Albaz. Albaz can discard a card to fuse into the Sprint. That's 2 interruptions so far. We do, of course, still have the Mirror Jade to non-target and banish a monster. Then if our opponent special summons a monster through a monster effect, we can activate the Grand Guignol to summon out the Ecclesia, and Ecclesia can summon the Fleur-de-Lis for our 4th interruption here. Deck is crazy, man. Of course, all of this is assuming you're just strictly playing with the 3 Chronicle decks. If you were looking to upgrade, all you really need is like 3 Forbidden Droplet and 3 Molcharmi Fuwolves for the main deck, alongside actual super poly targets like Garura and Muddragon. Then you just need to pick up the extra deck pieces like Luluwa Lilith, Sanctifier, Queritus, Guardian Chimera, Borrowload Furious Dragon, Light and Darkness Dragon Lord, Chaos Star Source Dragon. You know, then you can pop Branded and Red back into the main deck, drop the Ecclesia and Fleur-de-Lis stuff, and Bob's your uncle, dude. You got full power branded deck. For now, anyway.